Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 283, and I had a conversation with Ben Kutylo. He is the executive director at Forward Arkansas. It's a nonprofit whose mission is to, quote, accelerate the innovative and equitable transformation of education in Arkansas. Ben's background in education is really impressive. He believes, like I do, every kid deserves an incredible education, and that no matter where a kid is coming from, whatever their socioeconomic status or their ability to learn, whatever challenges they may face, they all deserve to have an equal footing and opportunity to grow and learn and find themselves and excel. And so he is on that mission. He worked in Chicago in the schools there to help educators change the direction of learning from within the school systems. He's the co-founder of Fremont Street. It's a national nonprofit philanthropy dedicated to, quote, catalyzing the redesign of schools and evolution of systems to improve the job of teaching and better prepare all students for success in life and today's economy. I mean, sounds like a superhero, right? Ben is also a really great guy and a friend, and I was really happy to have him on the show. And I think you're going to really dig this episode. We dig into his life, what he thought he was going to be doing, and then a change that was already bubbling within him. But then some life experiences really tipped the hat and sent him in this other direction and to the path that he's on now, which is great. We need more Bens in the world, in my humble opinion. I'm excited for you to hear this episode and learn all about him and his work. And who knows, maybe this episode will inspire you to help facilitate change in your own school systems, wherever you might be listening to this. Because, the more we lift up our kids, the better off we will all be. I really believe that. The usual stuff, social media, Hey Human Podcast can be found on Instagram and Facebook under Hey Human Podcast. My personal social media is Susan Ruthism all over the place, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And that's SUSANRUTHISM. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. Happy to answer any of your emails. SusanRuth.com is where you can sign up for the mailing list and check out other things about me as a person, me, myself, and I, and the things that I am doing around my life that isn't just the podcast. So music and art and creative things and writing and all that kind of stuff. If you're into music, you can find my stuff on, I'm saying stuff a lot for some inexplicable reason, but you can find me on iTunes, Spotify, that kind of thing under Susan Ruth. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And that's super helpful, and I really appreciate it, especially on iTunes, because it really makes a difference on the algorithms that we all know and love. On heyhumanpodcast.com, you will find a links page that will give you information about all of my guests, Ben included, of course, and piles of information of what we've discussed in every episode. So it's a really complete, well, not complete because it probably has things lacking, but it is a pretty epic list of different topics from every episode. So definitely check that out. Also on heyhumanpodcast.com is a storefront. You can buy Hey Human merch, like t-shirts or hats and things like that. And you also find a support Hey Human button on there. If you are so inclined, it helps keep Hey Human ad-free, and we like that. And you can support in any way, $1 or more. Every little bit helps, and it makes a difference. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening. Stay well, be safe, take care of each other, be kind, and, Throw some love around in places you think might need it especially. And maybe even places you don't think need it, because, surprise, it does. Everybody needs it. Everybody needs a little love. Am I right? Okay, enough of that. Let's get into this. Thanks for listening. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello. I can't see you yet. There you are.
There we go. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Guys, you're already recording me.
Well, yeah. Sorry. Don't do anything stupid.
I cannot promise.
Yeah, I've learned people are very chatty in the beginning, so I've learned to capture that in case we say something interesting or, whatever.
Got
I mean, that won't happen with you, of course, but
I've missed this. God, I've missed this. My head got too big since.
Yeah.
It's good. Like looking over my shoulder for, potential threat.
You don't know why you slept, though. I tagged you, and at night while you're sleeping, I say terrible things. Break your ass down.
I have been waking up feeling insecure. It's weird.
Yeah, that's me. It's working.
Good job, man.
Yeah. You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, Ben Kutylo, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you. This is your very first podcast. I promise I'll be gentle.
First podcast ever. Excited and honored that it's with you.
And thanks to you, I had Cameron Esposito on the show, and she was hilarious and wonderful and bright and interesting. So that's always good for a guest. So you have a lot to live up to. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can live up to Cameron Esposito. She is amazing and hilarious. And one quick point on Cameron Esposito is that she's big time now, but like I saw her in like a theater in Chicago where there were 8 people and her sister was running the lights and handing out cupcakes. So I saw her from the beginning, which has been very cool.
That's just, humble beginnings is what you want to hear of your superstars, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, and also you and I met through our mutual friend, AJ. So shout out to AJ. Thank you for having a crazy debauch weekend where you and I got to meet and make horrible fun of each other for 3 straight years.
Right off the bat, which,
that's true love.
That was the connection. That was the connection.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. You know that you're going to be a lifelong friend with someone if you can threaten bodily harm in the first 5 minutes.
Yes. And by the way, it was you threatening bodily harm.
Yes, I'm well aware.
Yeah.
I'm well aware. Yeah, I'm a rabble rouser. So anyway, Ben, tell us what are your humble beginnings? Where did you come from? What's your story?
Let's see. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati is an interesting place because it's like, it's a mid-sized city. It's right on the border with Kentucky and Indiana. So it's kind of like Appalachia there, like right outside of Cincinnati. But I grew up in the city itself. Wonderful experience growing up there. Kind of, I'd say like lower middle class. My mom worked off and on different things, including her own painting, wallpaper hanging business. My dad was kind of in the corporate world for a while. I went to Catholic grade school up through 6th grade.
Because you're a Catholic or just because it's a good education?
No, because my family is Catholic and I think it was a good education and the school was close to where we lived. Well, my brother, I also have a brother that's 7 years older, larger than life, hero worshiping from my standpoint. And so I followed in his footsteps in a lot of ways and for a long time. But he, in the 7th, he moved over to a Cincinnati public school, which is called Walnut Hills High School. And then I followed in his footsteps, and in the 7th grade, I moved over to Walnut Hills. That honestly changed my life in a lot of ways. When we get farther into the story, is a big contributor to, I think, who I am now in a lot of ways, but also the work that I do. So Walnut Hills is a Cincinnati public school. I went from this small Catholic school, St. Mary's, which was all white pretty much. And, there were like 60 kids in a grade, to Walnut Hills High School, which was, it went from 7th to 12th grade. And it was diverse, and it like representative of Cincinnati itself. So I think at that time it was like maybe 55% white, 45% African American. Also, like I went there in the 7th grade, what is that? Like 13-year-old pipsqueak. You're thrown in with like grown men and women, seniors in high school. So it's a bit intimidating at first. And the size of it, there were 2,500 kids. So the size of it was different, but like the school was amazing and really unique, even in the Cincinnati public school system, in that it was open and accepting of people of all types, race, ethnicity, yes, but like ideas. And so just kind of really like expanded as a person, and met some of the best friends, in my life that I still have today.
That's progressive for that time period. I mean, you're not that old, but for that time period to have a high school society, if you will. I mean, high school is hell regardless, but to have it be integrated, but also open to wiggly gender norms and all that kind of thing is good.
That was I remember, it was like right on the cusp of that. Like, at the school, I think very few people were out as gay or non-heterosexual, but that like started to happen while I was still there. And, the school, was like wide open, accepting of that too.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was a big, big experience. Certainly like growing up in Cincinnati that like, played a big role in who I am. From there, I went to, again, following in my brother's footsteps, I went to, kind of a different direction. I went to University of Notre Dame. So back to Catholic education, back to predominantly white, but also had amazing experience there. Really more like, more the experience of just becoming independent and like meeting just kind of like wonderful people, like good people and friends who again are like still friends today.
What did you study in college?
I studied business. I actually started out in engineering for the first semester and bailed on that primarily because of physics. The engineering level physics courses were ferocious. I don't know that I was that into it. I was more into I definitely wanted to get a good education, but not at the expense of the social part of college.
Yeah, that school really centers around its football, right?
Oh,
that's like a big thing there.
Yeah, football is huge. Like the year revolved around that. It was like great fun. But I'm interesting, and I'm not the typical Notre Dame grad that is like obsessed with football and things like that. Whereas like, friends of mine from there spend like hours per day on like football, looking at like high school kids, like bench pressing that are recruits for college football and things like that. And they call me like the odd one for not being so into it. I moved from engineering early on to business and more of the technology side of business.
Did you have an idea of what you wanted to do with your life, or not so much?
Actually, if I'm honest, no. Like I had really like no clue, hadn't given it much thought, didn't give it a whole lot of thought, like was kind of, again, following in the footsteps, had something inside of me, like my family, this kind of practical side of me that I knew I wanted to be like employable and get a good job and things like that. During that time, there was the original .com boom, right? So like the original technology boom.
That was the 90s, right? Mid 90s or something?
Like late 90s, ending in 2000, right when I like graduated. So, I was fired up about that. Like it was exciting. My brother was in that world too, so I was exposed to it a little bit. And so that's kind of the direction I went. But again, like really having no clue.
It's interesting that you kept following in your brother's footsteps.
Yes.
And you didn't, it doesn't sound like there was something that you were impassioned by that was steering your ship. It was just what's going on with Big Brother, the hero worshipy thing.
That was a big part of it. Yeah, I don't think like I thought about it a lot. I was more, a lot of it was like following in his footsteps. A lot of it, I mean, there were things I was interested and passionate about, even at that time and in high school. Like, I was like making a social impact, like was important to me.
That's interesting. How so?
Yeah, it was. Like, what did I do, or like what about it?
Yes.
I think part of it was like Walnut Hills again, and like being exposed to like so many different types of people from so many different backgrounds, like starting to realize the different circumstances from which people come and challenges that people are faced with. And I think the school also like promoted or supported that as a value, kind of service and social impact. I was involved in this youth group at the time too. And that was a part of it as well. So got involved in like different volunteer opportunities and things like that, but saw the inequities some of the inequities are out there even at this time. And I don't know how much of this is like,
no, it's interesting.
So you were hindsight
drawn to more social justice things because of what you were seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Passionate about like history, passionate about like the natural world. Even back then, I was a kid that like watched bass fishing on TV, even though I lived in the city of Cincinnati. But like none of that, like decisions that were being made were like more practical and like following in footsteps and things like that. Left college and went into the working world, worked for a small technology company, actually the company where my brother worked. Interestingly enough, at that time, like during this .com boom, before it like burst, like jobs were everywhere, So, started my first job, lived with one friend from high school, one friend from college in Chicago, and was goofing around a lot, still like trying to, more or less live that kind of college life. On that first opportunity, and by the way, just keep going here.
Yeah.
Okay. That first
You're doing great.
Okay, good. So then some things started to change, which like started really to change the trajectory of my life. First, like 9 months into that first job, or maybe even 6 months, like the .com bubble burst, right? Companies, especially a lot of early like startup technology companies at that time, like started to struggle, including mine, which was a small shop. So like 9 months into that, like I got laid off, right? Of my first job. Yeah. Which was like, well, to be honest, at that time, I was like, sweet, like, like
unemployment.
I got the summer off. So I was like, okay, what do I do? What do I do now? And started to look for opportunities that were basically in the same space or area. I did have a wonderful time that summer. It was great and a great place to be. But
Chicago is awesome when it's nice out.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, I was like 22 years old and we lived like 5 blocks from Wrigley Field. And it was amazing. Lots of fun. But I ended up finding one opportunity, like a couple in Chicago, but then one with a company which no longer exists, but was like a big technology company back then. It's since been kind of gobbled up, but Sun Microsystems.
The Girls Gone Wild?
It was, yeah. They were launching a big technology platform. No, Sun Microsystems. And that's right. Yeah. I helped shape that. It was great. Yeah. And that required me, like their central headquarters was in Colorado. As a part of the program, like I would have to move there for a year, basically like solo. And I'd always I'd always followed in my brother's footsteps, who also lived in Chicago. I always like stayed close to friends, things like that. But this was a good opportunity. And, when I first thought about it, I was like, no way, I can't, I'm not going to leave. I ultimately, I made the decision to do it. And so I moved to Colorado, 22 years old, completely solo, not knowing anyone there.
First grown-up moment, really.
Really, it was. Yeah. I mean, thinking back now, part of it was the opportunity. It was a good opportunity, good company. But part of it was I don't know, wanting to break out a little bit, to be honest, and chart my own path a little bit, I think. Also, I was excited about Colorado. I spent close to a year there. It was sweet. I mean, it was a great opportunity. We were in I was with, it was this kind of leadership program, and was with 11 other 22-year-olds. And we were mostly getting trained. So didn't have a huge amount of responsibility. The opportunity was all funded by the company and stuff. So got to live in Colorado and,
That's
make
great.
some new friends. Yeah. I mean, it was scary. It was certainly scary at first. I remember the first day I got there, just feeling this sense of anxiety, oh my gosh, what have I done? I don't know anybody. What do I do? But it ended up being amazing and an amazing experience. And that's where I got into fly fishing, which has become my passionate obsession. The deal was I found the job in Chicago, you go out to Colorado, get trained, and then come back to Chicago. And that in my mind, reduced the risk initially, but the thing is that company was also impacted by the economy and the technology bubble bursting. And, so while I was out there, the opportunity in Chicago, got terminated, no longer available. So I had to choose between other locations. And the two that were offered to me were Detroit and Cleveland. And so I know at the time, I ended up choosing Detroit because I had a good friend from college that lived in Ann Arbor. And so I moved there, I think started to grow up a little bit there, had some more real responsibility.
Did you feel like you were in, because now I know what you do now, so I'm baiting it, but did you start to have a sense, a feeling that this isn't really my life?
Yes.
This isn't really, yeah.
I did even at the first job. I was with all friends from college and, so I just didn't think about it that much. I really at Sun and in Detroit, in Ann Arbor, which I loved. And I love that area and love that area to this day. But I really started to feel that way there. I just had this nagging sense of this isn't what I want to be doing. I'm not sure what it is I want to be doing. But I was pretty sure this wasn't it long term. So 2 years in, it's funny actually with AJ, and I don't know if you know this, we planned this together. He was kind of in the same boat, working for another company. And we were both ready to make a transition, not feeling like we were headed in the right direction. And he and I and one other guy, Nate, Nate.
Yeah, he and his wife, I love them. They have great kids.
Yeah, they do. All of us decided to quit our jobs, and we all traveled to South America together. And Nate stayed for 2 months. AJ stayed for 3, and then I stayed for 6, actually an additional 3 months. And so we traveled between Chile, Argentina, and then those guys left. And then I went to Peru and back to Argentina for a while.
What made you do all that? Why did you stay? Was it for love?
It wasn't for love. It wasn't for love. It was kind of, I don't know for sure, but it was this sense of it was me trying to I think break out of this path that I was on where I'm like doing things, maybe for other people, though they're not necessarily pushing me in that way, but I'm doing things like to follow in footsteps and to kind of like break off that path. Also, like, wanting some adventure, like wanting more exposure to the world. Incredibly lucky to be in a position to do something like that. But yeah, it was like, another step. I mean, I think the move to Colorado was the first, and then this was like the next step in trying to like break this, figure out what I wanted, or break this like trajectory.
What were you starting to learn about yourself during that?
I think I was starting to learn, I was starting to learn that I think I had, like, in little ways and big ways, like I was a peacemaker, pleaser, whatever in life. And so I was doing things often, I think, like for other people, to meet their needs, or at least as I perceived them, and less my own, to the point where like I wasn't necessarily even reflecting on my own needs or what I wanted, which is why I think like in college, like I was clueless as to what I wanted to do with my life. So I think that was part of the reason, maybe without fully consciously knowing it, the reason that I did that. And also what I was starting to like learn about myself. And then just being in South America first, I mean, with Nate and AJ, like it was incredibly fun.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, an incredible experience to have with such good friends. And I mean, like we were spending every second together. I mean, and you get to know people like, extremely well.
I could tell that even just seeing you and AJ around each other. I think I said it to either one or both of you that you behave like brothers. You behave like you have surpassed the level of friendship to I love you regardless. You're pissing me off right now, or I love you. We're going to do this crazy stuff, whatever it is.
Yes. I would agree with that. That. Like, and that was a big part of that. I remember he and I, like, we'd spent so much time together. We would like go to a bar and like get a beer and like sit there in complete silence for like 2 hours and like did not feel awkward at all. Like because we like, spent so much time together. We're so comfortable with each other. Didn't have anything left to chat about anyway. And like, didn't care,
That is a male talent, to be able to sit for hours without speaking.
Yeah.
What would be like, so hey, what about that?
Yeah. Then those guys left, and I purposely like stayed longer because like I'd made this big jump and wanted to continue the experience. I also wanted to like, I mean, it was kind of like a challenge for myself too. Like it's easier in that experience where you have these great friends to like rely on, and that's who you hang out with the most, and they speak English just like you. So I guess I wanted to push myself beyond that and like immerse myself in the experience a little bit more, and did that. And then the other thing I'll say about it, to your question, is like this is like before cell phones were really prevalent. And so we went there and didn't have cell phones. And there were like internet cafes and things like that, but we had phone cards and would hop on public phones to call home. And it was also this incredible sense of freedom where you were like solo. I am making the decisions I want to make. I am like completely charting my own path. And that was an incredible part of the experience.
Yeah. That's why I want to do the Camino someday. That's on my bucket list.
What's the Camino again?
It's the walk. It's like through Spain and France, and the spiritual walk. The pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, you should do it.
I will someday. Yeah.
So then I finally had to come back at some point. Funds started to dry up, and then I came back to Chicago. Still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. joined like another technology company, but this time in different roles, more in like sales and marketing, for a small but stable technology company. And so I did that for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years, probably.
It must have been so weird to come out of that experience of 6 months of that traveling into.
It was weird because
real
you get
life,
to be.
quote unquote.
It was weird because you like get in this cool, peaceful like state, and then like free spirited state, and then come back into that world is hard. Was hard, but again, like a very lucky problem to have.
Sure, of course.
But so I joined this company and like did real well there, and like had fun, and like it certainly pushed me professionally in ways I'd never been pushed. Like had tough, good but like tough bosses. Like sales pushed me in a way, and in a way I hadn't been before, and put kind of it's a certain type of pressure too in that world.
Especially for a people pleaser, for a sales person who's, that's a strange mix of personality type.
But very good actually for me to like skills to learn, and to kind of learn to overcome that to some degree.
Yeah. Always be closing.
Oh, ABC. That's all that matters. What are your numbers? But then again, like before long, that same feeling like I had at Sun Microsystems, that like nagging feeling of like, the work is challenging. I work with good people, like, but just for me, this is not the right fit. Like, I want to do something that's more like meaningful for me, but still really didn't have much of a clue as to what that was. So I went on really this like, and meanwhile, I was living in Chicago with friends, and actually this other friend, VJ, who I went to college with, that's who I lived with in Michigan. I came back and we were roommates in Chicago too. Another, one of my really, really good friends. In fact, we lived together for 6 years. I mean, that's like, 6 years.
And so how old are you at this point in the story?
At this point, I'm like, I probably started at that company and got back from South America when I was like 25 to like 29, 30.
I'm curious if you have this feeling that you're not exactly doing whatever it is you're supposed to do. And on top of that, not knowing what that is, did that affect other areas of your life?
Yeah, it did. I think there was some like anxiety involved there, for sure. Just like, feeling kind of unsettled or uneasy about it. And that anxiety would like, manifest too, like in other ways, but like, just knowing that wasn't right, but not knowing where to go either.
Yeah.
For sure.
Especially in a world, in America, where we're taught, be the cog, you go and you do the thing and you help the greater machine work its thing. Yeah. And you're not supposed to question it. You grow up, you go get a job, you get a family, you do all that stuff. But there are outliers. And for the outliers, it's a very uncomfortable pair of shoes to be wearing.
Yeah, it is. And that was my experience. And it kind of felt like that was always there in me. And going through my life, and I have friends and I respect people that choose the path of like, that other path you just described, total respect for that, and everybody is entitled to their own happiness and
absolutely. For some people, the sweater isn't scratchy.
Yeah. Right. And going in that direction, I could there are days in my life where I wish I was able to go.
I totally get that. Yes. I completely understand.
I've never been that type of person,
Yeah.
Well, so I launched into this career exploration process, and I actually got a career coach who I worked with for probably over a year, just someone to kind of help me like sort this out. Like, what are my values? Like, what's important to me? What are things that I might want to consider doing? And like getting to know myself a little bit better. And, this woman was like really helpful and amazing. And I kept coming back to wanting to make a social impact. The purpose in the work I had been doing, like that, or at least the lack of underlying purpose, like that was a big issue for me. And then like education, for some reason, I think this had a lot to do with like my experience at Walnut Hills and like how wonderful it was and how impactful it can be. Like I kept coming back to education, so I started to explore like being a teacher, being a like school counselor. I grew up in this like family where money was tight. One of my values was like financial security and like frugality. They should make a lot more money, but teachers and school counselors don't make that much money, and their earnings potential isn't. And so that was like a concern or a risk for me. But anyway, I was going to make this, and I it's not like through that career counseling process, we came to this, like, you figured it out. This is it. You're going to be like a fireman. No, it was like, it was never that clear, but I like I was still going to have to take a leap. And I decided I wanted to take this leap into education. And so I started to apply to graduate school because I really had no credibility or experience in education itself. And I applied to a bunch of different schools, and I took forever to take the GRE. My friends made fun of me because I like drug it out for so long. But I applied to different schools, and I got in, and I was actually thinking I would be like a school counselor. And I actually got in to the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I was looking for other schools, like, different things, but things, like work out for a reason. I got in there, but it was for a program that was really, it was called like risk and prevention at the time. It was like to prepare people to be like school counselors. It was also a 1-year program. And I was at a point in my life, like 30s, where like, I don't know, I wasn't interested in having like another like college experience. I wanted to make it count and get on with it. And so the 1-year program was attractive. But so I went back. It's funny. I started this program, Risk and Prevention, and realized almost immediately, had this other nagging feeling, like this is not becoming a school counselor. And I was working in a Boston public school too, kind of as like a, almost intern. Like it was, yeah, kind of like an internship. I was like, this isn't right, and I had like a panicked moment about that. And maybe this is something I was learning on the way, like, thinking back, like I when I had that instinct, that gut instinct, like in my life, I have taken action on it, rather than just like disregard it or push through it. So I went through this big kind of rigmarole at the university to switch programs, actually. So I switched from risk and prevention to this other, it was called education policy and management. It was stressful. They were only so on letting me do it, but I pushed hard. And so made that shift, and then felt like, at that point, that was the right place. And really, really realized at that point that, working in schools, I have tremendous respect for those folks, but that wasn't going to be the right fit for me. And I wanted to kind of bring, the strategy, like technology work, like some of the skills and experience I had, like into my work moving forward in education. So there was also something like happening in me at the time, or that happened through this experience, where in college, like I didn't honestly like put that much effort forth. Like I wasn't, and I don't think anyone would have described me as like, the most motivated person.
Yeah.
And would never have described me as like type A. Not that, type A is a thing to be, but I think I was more, I think that, like kind of people pleasing peacemaker part of me.
Youngest child, baby.
Exactly. It led me to kind of, push some of that down. And like, also, because of that, I think people's expectations of me were that I wasn't that, and that like pissed me off actually. It really made me mad because like I knew, I don't know. I was like,
you knew what you were capable of.
I knew I was capable of.
Yeah.
I wanted to accomplish a lot, and like, I didn't like that people didn't have that perception of me.
Would you say that when you stood up to switch over at Harvard, that was the first time you were really putting your voice out there? And
it was the first time I was putting my voice out there, and the first time I was like really kind of pushing myself hard and like really aggressively trying to figure out what I wanted to do and the impact I wanted to make, and like being like proactive and aggressive about getting there.
It's like you woke up from a dream or something. You were sleeping for a long time.
Kind of. And by the way, during this time too, like right before I'd left, I'd met Allison, who had become my wife. And so I was also, we remained together like long distance while I was going through this, and not only just like the school experience, but this experience in life too. So I finished up that program, did well. But then I was like, yeah, I don't know. My whole outlook on things had kind of changed. And that's really when my career and life changed in a big way. I did go back to Chicago. Here's an example of, kind of the action that I was taking, or like, being much more like aggressive about it. So there was an organization called the Chicago Public Education Fund that I'd like identified, heard about, and wanted to work for. But it was a small organization, like directed by some big, kind of a who's who in Chicago in the corporate and civic communities, like really highly regarded, worked really closely with like city and Chicago public schools leadership. And, they were looking for people with like my type of experience, So it was like, a professional crush. Like I wanted to work there. But it was a small shop, and there were no openings or anything like that. But there was this like new, almost like fellowship program, like a nonprofit organization called Education Pioneers had rolled out. And what I found out was that actually the Chicago Public Education Fund was one of their partners. And so they would bring on like a summer fellow through that program. So I applied for that program. And, there was this intensive interview process, got into that program. And then I influenced the Chicago or like the Midwest executive director to like, I was like, I want to be placed at the Chicago Public Education Fund. And I got it. I was placed there. And then just for the summer, with no, expectation or promise of like a full-time position. And then, I like worked hard that summer and pushed, expressed my interest to want to like join the team, and then was brought on that team and ended up working there for 6 years. at the organization. So all that said, like I was driven by this new like sense of like motivation and wanting to make an impact. And, but it was hard because like I was like starting back entry level, you know, and I took like a big salary cut and like all of this, you know, from the work I'd been doing before. And so for those first couple of years, I was like, what have I done? You know, like, what did I do? Like, and was like, you know, always in this position of like fighting to kind of feeling like I was undervalued, you know, because and like I could do more, but I'm entering this new sector and space and not necessarily getting those opportunities. Like as time went on, started to get deeper in the work, started to gain more credibility and like increasingly more responsibility, 5 or 6 years and like really start to do some incredible work. My kind of experience at the Chicago Public Education Fund and in Chicago public schools then really kind of shaped my like theory of change and my beliefs on in the world of education about, I guess what I think needs to happen to the types of change that needs to happen in education and kind of how that needs to happen.
What sort of things did you see while you were there?
Well, the first half of my time there, I was working with, we had this insider outsider relationship with, we're an independent organization, but worked really closely with Chicago Public Schools leadership. You know, lots of great, smart people worked there, but it was also, you know, it was crazy. It was specifically a crazy time. Like in 5 or 6 years, they had 5 different CEOs or superintendents, right? So
wow.
It's an enormous, no, not a good sign. It's an enormous organization, like, you know, multi-billion-dollar annual operating budget, like huge, 40, 50,000 employees.
And their stance is to get into the Chicago schools and better them, correct? Help they facilitate children learning better. And
Chicago Public Schools, it was that big of an organization. My organization was much smaller, but yes, that was our approach, was to support Chicago Public Schools and really from the focus of supporting like talent, teachers and principals, right? So in the first half of my time there, we were really working closely with leadership, and I worked on like district-wide talent strategy, right? And how it works and how that work rolled out was like, and I worked specifically on teacher evaluation. So kind of there was a big federal program to rethink how teachers are evaluated in schools in a way that was, you know, much more performance-based, but also in a way that provided meaningful feedback for teachers' growth, you know?
How do you even get teachers excited in certainly many of schools across America are failing? But how do you get teachers excited or even principals to be a part of a system that is crumbling from the foundation up, and especially when they're not being paid what they should be paid? And in some cities, it's a dangerous work. You know, there's kids all learn differently, and to try and put 60 kids in a classroom with one teacher and one assistant is mind-boggling. They have to pay for their own, you know, supplies. I mean, there's a list that it's Sisyphean at best.
Yeah, it's a tough job. And in some ways, like, I have so much respect for teachers and principals everywhere, but certainly in Chicago public schools. You know, it's still like a good job in a lot of ways, like a good job, like financially, right? In some ways, you know, overwhelmingly the teachers and principals and the folks that I met, like, cared about their work, you know?
Absolutely. You would have to take on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, you would. And they wanted to better serve students, and they wanted to improve their craft, you know? Overwhelmingly. But what I learned in that first, so how do you, your question, like, how do you engage or get teachers and principals excited about it? Well, I think kind of the way we did it was not that much at all. So it was, what I saw there, we did put as much effort. We did launch a big educator teacher engagement effort there. What happens often in education is at least in my experience is decisions are made by policymakers or by leaders in the system, or sometimes folks even outside of the system. And they're smart people, and they're also very well-intentioned people. They make those decisions. This is the problem. This is the solution. And then that gets pushed down to schools and classrooms and communities. One, it happens over and over and over in education this way. And, often, at least, I think a lot of what gets pushed down, really, first, the folks on the ground who actually have to implement it, didn't have a say in it. Right.
Right.
And it also has, in lots of cases, has dramatic impacts on their jobs, right? In daily life. And so regardless if it's the best policy or best model or best strategy, when rolled out that way, and because there's, this has happened so much historically in education, at times there's all out resistance, and Chicago has seen that a lot. At best, the buy-in or support is weak. And a lot of times those solutions don't really, fully consider the realities of implementation and weren't created in ways that did engage educators and other folks in the community, on the front end.
And you're stuck in the middle, I'm sure. And that's got to be.
Well, at that point in time, I didn't have that perspective so much. I was this makes sense. Teacher evaluation makes sense. The recommendations we're making, the system that Chicago is setting up is actually thoughtful and elegant in some ways. And has the intention of being fair for educators, but a step forward, when rolled out in that way with I think without, it just leads to weak buy-in and support. And no matter how good it is, if that isn't there, the results aren't going to be there either. And so I kind of saw that view, right, of education, and had studied it enough to see that that's how things happen a lot in education. So in the second half of my time there, there's kind of this growing or resurgence of this movement around innovation in education and how we approach it. I was excited about that. And technology was a big part of that. Technology had never really, the way it has in other sectors, had not really penetrated or scratched the surface of education.
Do you mean technology that every kid has a laptop technology, or just placing computer labs in the school? Because obviously there are kids that are poor and can't afford internet, so they don't have access when they're home.
Well, so those types of things, yes. But I'm talking about I guess I'm talking more about software. So ways that support teachers you talked about one teacher to 30 students, one teacher, two teachers to 60 students.
Right.
It's impossible. And you have this group of students that comes in that, if you're teaching the third grade, which is that's another holdover in the system anyway, grouping kids together by just purely based on age, it was just developed 100 years ago because it was an efficient way to move kids through school. But you have kids in the third grade, on any given concept, on any given thing, that are on 8th grade level, 1st grade level. For one teacher to be able to address those needs for 30 students, it's an impossible job.
Yeah.
But technology held, and some of this is proving out, I think, holds huge promise to increase teachers' abilities or effectiveness to start to address those more individualized needs for students and learning styles and things like that in ways, no one person could do on their own. So anyway, this is something that I got super excited about. And, the organization that the Chicago Public Education Fund got excited about too. And so I helped launch a new priority for the organization, which was focused on innovation in schools. And where it was so different from the work we'd done previously is that it was, of course, we had buy-in and support from leadership in Chicago Public Schools, but it was much more at the school and community level. So it was really focused on engaging teams of principals and teachers in different communities. A big part of it was mindset. Everybody has been working in schools that look a certain way, in a system that looks a certain way, and, is pretty compliance driven, compliance focused, not really, focused on standardization, not really on innovation and risk taking. For folks to start to do that in schools, to start to do that on their own, is not really a reasonable expectation. After they've spent so much, some are ready for that, but after you've spent so much time in this one model, in this one system that looks a certain way, to move outside of that without help is really challenging. So we started to actually create programs and supports that really put folks in schools, with support, with a structured process, we used a lot of design thinking, things like that, support them to, and give them agency, empower them in ways that they hadn't been before, to actually identify the problems that they and their students were facing in their schools, and help them more deeply understand those problems, and then help them determine different solutions to address those problems, right? Which were often, creative or different or innovative, especially compared to the ways they were addressing those problems before. First, what we found when we approached, at the beginning, we didn't even know how to talk about it, how to get people interested in it. We're calling people please sign up for this, people we knew. But what we found is that, and we were giving little grants too for people to participate.
Yeah. That always helps, right?
It does help. And it helps and it's, they're committing extra time to do this, and it's respectful of their time and effort, to do this. But I think what we found, and what I found, is when you approach folks in that way, when you approach teachers and principals and community members in that way, empowering them, but with support and guidance, starting small, but and not only focused on the operational components, but also kind of the mindset. Look, just because schools have looked this way in the past, it doesn't mean that's the way it has to be moving forward, so to kind of push outside of that, and even creating space for a principal and a team of 3 to 5 teachers to work together and actually think about this stuff, the response was incredible. And the value of the experience for these folks, regardless of what they created, in that first short 3-month program, the experience was something that they raved about. And what we found is as word started to get out about this experience, and that our organization was genuine in providing this experience and empowering educators and giving them agency, more and more people wanted to do it. And the demand for it went through the roof. To in year 2, we had 40 schools participate from 17 year 1. And then year 3, we had 80. And 5 years down the road after I left the organization, 120 schools apply per year. That's a sixth of Chicago public schools.
Were you seeing it? Were you seeing on the other side of it, kids getting more excited about learning and maybe going forward into four-year colleges, things like that? Was that making a difference?
So the work that I was talking about is just the beginning, right? So it's just about getting, the educators and community members and the folks that have the potential to make that impact that you're talking about, first getting them engaged. But what we saw also is like once they got engaged and saw the potential, many wanted to go deeper and start to kind of, rethink schools, rethink instruction in much more comprehensive ways.
That's what agency does, isn't it?
That's right.
Creates space.
That's right.
Agency creates space for new ideas and for giving someone a fire in their belly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, when we actually gave them the opportunity to like identify the biggest challenges that they were facing, they were the same challenges that we were trying to address already. Like, it's not like, they know it comes up every time. They know they can't like, I have all these kids with different needs. Like it's really I can't meet those needs, So, almost every teacher will, comes to that conclusion or already knows that. And so, but giving them the opportunity to, come to that conclusion themselves and explore it more deeply. That process is critical to openness.
And moving forward, I think about that too, like with the way that the state of education is in America. If we paid our teachers more and we made it exciting, a field that drew more people so that we could have a decent small class with teachers that can give more individualized lesson plans and teaching, that within 2 generations, the entire face of this nation would be different. Of what its capabilities would be, the innovation that would come from it, the creativity that would come from it, the work, all of it would completely change within 2 generations.
Yeah. Yes.
It seems like such a no-brainer. It's like, God, why is it so hard to?
Well, sometimes I feel that way too. So this experience, a lot of those folks that started in this small program, and that was about, I always talk about like activating demand. They then went on through different programs, some of which we created, and others through, other local national partners to actually kind of rethink, redesign their entire schools. So everything from school schedules, what teachers' roles are, to how they're delivering instruction, to how they're creating more collaborative, innovative cultures in their schools, how they're engaging parents. And some of those are held, some of those still today are held up as national models. But really this experience in seeing like this close work with teachers and principals and going to their schools and, seeing it for myself and working with them through this process and seeing the impact that it has, both for the people and really that this kind of like different approach to change has, it completely shifted my thinking on education and also dramatically increased my like optimism on the potential to improve education overall.
If
we start to think differently about how we approach it. To some degree. Is
that what you took with you? So now you're at Forward Arkansas. Is that the same? Is it the same idea that you're doing there, or is this a whole new thing? Yeah,
it is. So I spent a couple of years then at an ed tech company, and then had the opportunity to launch a small foundation that was focused on similar things and really kind of crystallized the thinking around how we approach change, how we, engage people at all levels, from leadership down to principals, teachers, parents, in approaching school differently. Mm-hmm. And we did projects in different states and different contexts. So, rural and suburban, and it all played out in the same way, to be honest.
Did you also ask kids themselves? Because I think teachers do see a lot, but really getting down and saying, hey, how do you learn? What do you feel? What's going on with you? And giving the children agency as well in conjunction with and partnership with the teacher.
Absolutely. And a big part of, I don't think, so we did some of that work ourselves, in Chicago and at future organizations. But that was also part of the experience too, that we created for the people that went through the programs that we created too. So, they call it, in the design thinking world, it's like empathy work. So almost like shadowing a student, engaging with students, understanding, not just at school, but from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed, what their experience is like in life. And then in school, all of that informing then, a deeper understanding of the challenges that you're actually facing and like how to approach them. But so to your question, yes, long story, but a year and a half ago, we moved to Arkansas. Happy to get into that if you want. I would have never imagined 2 years ago.
That's a big jump.
It is a big jump. It is a big jump. Chicago, we were in Boston for 4 or 5 years and then moved to Arkansas.
I mean, that's some culture shock, probably. It's a beautiful country, though. It's a beautiful part of the country.
Cool. I love it here.
Good for fishing, I suppose, too.
Amazing for fishing and just outdoors in general. There's a lot going on. It's a beautiful place. It feels like home already in a lot of ways. Like it's first, it's unique in that there are a lot of resources here and a lot of folks invested in the state and in making the state better. And a lot of resources in comparison to, or like relative to the size of the state that it is. Right. And then also back to that, like scale, it's not an enormous state, right? There are 260 school districts, 270 school districts in the state, 1,000 schools total in the state. And just for comparison, Chicago has 600 schools, just the city. And just so from a scale perspective, it's approachable. And kind of it has politics, it has layers. I found it to be, a little bit less complex, a little bit less saturated from some of those other places. So I just feel like the opportunity here is incredible. And so I joined this organization, Forward Arkansas, about 6 or 7 months ago. It is probably the clearest example of, in my life of like things happening for a reason, or, on this path, like me moving to Arkansas, like 2 years ago, this wasn't even an idea. And 2 years later, I'm in Arkansas with a fully Arkansas focused job.
And you found a purpose. You found who you are and what your purpose is.
Yeah.
Along the way.
I love it. It's a dream job for me. And I've said this a few times, like you go through interview processes and like you never get the full story, so about the organization or context or history or things like that. So, and I'm not naive. I know that.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting to get the full story afterwards, but the full story has been overwhelmingly positive. The board is amazing and diverse. The team is solid, and there is like a support for and hunger for this type of like change and innovation. Among our organization, our board, our funders, but just in the state overall. And there, in individual communities, there is an openness to support. And by the way, I started this job during COVID. So that was, challenging, because not only are we trying to rethink our vision and strategy longer term, but, we're in this position where we need to play an active role in supporting schools and communities and kids, families through what is, one of the greatest challenges we've faced as a country, or from an education perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So trying to balance that, but all of that work that I talked about in Chicago and beyond, we're bringing that here. And so it is very much about catalyzing, supporting, communities and districts, in innovating, in like identifying, setting a vision and identifying how they might, the barriers to achieving that vision and how they might approach it differently, right? For their students, thinking much more broadly about the needs of students that we're trying to address. So the world has changed dramatically since schools and this education system were designed, right? What kids need, what people need to have opportunities in life and in career has changed dramatically too. But the experience students have in schools, I'm not saying there hasn't been a lot of movement and there aren't like incredible examples, but like largely, I don't think has kept pace with those changing needs. And so a big part of it is about, we need to rethink these approaches to like meet this broader set of needs, which is beyond reading and math. Those are important still, but we know people and kids need other skills like creativity and collaboration and communication and social emotional skills and learning, self-management, self-awareness, and they need exposure to and access to diverse career opportunities. And by the way, what that looks like may look a little bit different in every community. And we, equity is a huge focus and value of our organization. So, how do we do that for communities and those students that need it most?
Well, I think back, to what we were talking about earlier with economics, that not all children are created equal in the realm of economics. Some come from very poor families and some very wealthy. And of course, historically, if you're in a wealthy family, your education is 100 to 1,000 times better.
Yes. And all the other opportunities, your education in school, is better, and all of the other opportunities surrounding that.
Right. And what comes next and what jobs you're offered and how all of it. And also
networks, relationships. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's an unconscious, I think, bias sometimes with teachers with kids that they don't. I experienced that in my junior high. I saw how the kids who were maybe not from very stable economic backgrounds, how the teachers would treat them as less than. And that does happen too. So there's a whole
huge issue.
Yeah.
Microaggressions, things like that, where and expectations are a huge issue. We need to have high and the same expectations for every student, and expect that that every student can achieve those expectations. If you don't, then you're going to treat kids differently, and they will believe that too. They will believe they will not have those expectations of themselves.
Right, for sure.
So that's a huge part of the work.
But it's so simple.
It's complicated and simple. I have big visions, big plans, high hopes. Like I do think the potential is here. We're going to approach it in the same way. It's really, work with communities, engaging communities, but providing support, taking action, doing the same with other, partners in this education space or ecosystem. But then we also play a role at the policy and systems level too. But, doing that in a collaborative, supportive way, but also taking all of what we learn and all the work that we do in communities across the state, first telling those stories, like storytelling, like here's what happens when you approach it in a different way, or here's what can happen even in these, communities that people, don't expect it to happen in, these struggling communities. But then taking all of that and what we learn and then influencing state policy and state strategy in ways that more effectively align with needs that people have on the ground.
Yeah. So if other states catch wind, and do they reach out to you, or are you the guy now, the architect of bettering the education? So yeah.
No, we're not. I think, I hope we get to a place where other states, I want to, Arkansas is, by the standards or measures that we have, is towards the end of the list, towards the bottom of the list, in education performance. There are flaws in those measures, but, for sure. But,
you're saying the list being the national list of where
the national
they
list
fall.
of states, like education performance,
Yeah.
My goal is, I've only lived here for a year and a half, but I already feel this way. Like I want Arkansas to be a leader and be seen as a leader. And I truly believe it's possible. And I'm impatient about it too. Like I want to make it happen fast, and I think it can. So we're not seen that way yet. I'm only 6 months in, so we have a lot to accomplish and execute on here, and we have to do this work here. But my goal,
faith in you.
Thank you. My goal is that we are at Arkansas does become a national leader, and I think it's possible, and I want. Hopefully it is a leader in demonstrating the potential of this different approach to change.
Tell people how they can find you if they have questions, or maybe they want to start implementing some of these ideas in their towns, their states.
Well, our website, if you want to learn more, is forwardarkansas.org. So that just those two words. We're revamping our website, so some of the information on there should change soon. But if they want to find me, best way to reach me would be probably through email. Ben Kutylo @gmail.com, first and last name. Kutylo. Ben Kutylo, yep.
And I'll put links to stuff that we've talked about, to all of this, and to find you through Hey Human podcast as well, so that people can. It's exciting, and I'm hopeful. It's so important. I know that people like to give, these days at least, it feels like education is vilified. Knowing things feels vilified a lot of cases, but it really, you learn who you are by learning about lots of different things. And when people are excited about your curiosity and feed that curiosity at the level where you are, it allows you to grow in a healthy way, in a confident way. Confidence is everything when you're a kid. Yes. And it's so hard to find that dominion as a kid over oneself, over one's mind, over one's action.
Yes. And, it's, we have this system that is, in a lot of ways, it's one size fits all. And that's the way it was built. And it worked when it was originally designed. And
and it just doesn't anymore.
Yeah. And it doesn't work for every kid. And it doesn't work for kids that enter from more challenging circumstances too. And the thing is, there's an opportunity to change it. Like, we can change it. There's nothing stopping us but history and, quite a bit of inertia too, but like, it's changeable.
Yeah, I believe so.
And
I'm a good example of this because I barely graduated junior high and high school. I eked out with, I think, a 1.7, and that's probably being generous. But I really wanted to go to college. I hated junior high and high school. I did not fit in at all. The way I learned and the way things that I was excited about was not what was happening around me. I got kicked out of classes for having opinions about literature, things like that.
Really?
Yeah, I was. And when I went to college, I went to Western Washington, Bellingham, and there I got, except for one pre-calculus class, I got all A's because finally it was a kind of learning that it was that my brain loved.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big believer that kids learn in an individual way, and sure, there's probably the average, circle of kids that are in the same boat and are learning the same way. But it's, again, those outliers. But those outliers change the world. And if we let them slip through the cracks, we are, as humanity, we are in trouble.
Yeah, agreed. And I would say it's more than like outliers. It's most like
outliers from the average kids that are just like doing well and like getting their homework done. And
are successful in this system. But even they would benefit. Even kids that are successful in this system would benefit from a different experience.
And there is pressure on those kids too. I'm not throwing baby out with the bathwater. Those kids that really, I knew those kids in high school that they were getting all A's and they had to, or else, God forbid, whatever might happen at home. So that's a whole other level of pressure that's happening. So that isn't to say that, they're valuable as well. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm just from my own perspective. Yeah.
No, there's a ton of pressure on those kids too. But I would just say, just as an example, even for those kids that, have those opportunities or are successful in this model by the standards or measures that we have and move on to college and whatever else, like still like 50 minutes of math, independently disconnected from all other subjects, not necessarily relevant to kind of their lives or real world. Like there's a potential to like make that better, to make it more relevant, more engaging. And it's hard, don't get me wrong. But I think the structure, the system needs to change for everybody.
Yeah.
And by the way, I think all of this is possible. And I think it has to be possible while also making everybody in this system, right? Like making their lives better, meeting their needs. So like parents, teachers, principals, district superintendents, state leaders, others, like it doesn't have to, I don't think this change has to be done in such a way that one certain group of stakeholders completely loses out. In fact, I think if it's done in that way, it won't be effective. I think it can be done in a way that different motivations, different needs, like those can still be met while moving towards this different change or vision.
Yeah, it's awesome. Ben, thank you for being on Hey Human. I really appreciate it. This is exciting. I'm excited for, like Whitney Houston, I believe the children are our future.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.